Walter White, better known as Heisenberg, is one of the smartest and most dangerous characters on TV. He started as a high school chemistry teacher, but after being diagnosed with cancer, he slowly transformed into the drug lord that we all know him as. He's a master manipulator, a brilliant planner, and isn't afraid to kill if it means protecting his empire. But what if he wasn't up against just the DEA? What if he had to face some of the best detectives in fiction, people known for solving impossible cases and catching the uncatchable? So here's a breakdown of these detectives on who could realistically catch Walter White and who couldn't stand a chance. And also, before we start this video, I know near the end of the show Walter got exposed as Heisenberg, but we're basing this off when he was still in his prime and people didn't know that he was Heisenberg. And before we get into this video, let me explain the tiers for you guys so you understand what I am ranking. Now, coming in at the top tier is they put Walter behind bars, which is pretty self-explanatory. They'll find out he's Heisenberg, which means they won't have enough evidence to put him behind bars, but they'll know his true identity. And they'll have their suspicions, which means they wouldn't know that he's Heisenberg or have enough evidence to put him behind bars, but will kind of suspect that, wait, something's off about this guy. And they'll end up dead, which means they might actually find out that he could be Heisenberg or have their suspicions, but they won't see the light of day to actually prove it. And coming in first, we have James Stokes from Dexter. Now, Stokes is the kind of detective who runs on pure instinct. He doesn't always need hard evidence to know that someone's up to no good. He just gets a gut feeling and follows it, exactly like he did with Dexter. He's very aggressive and he's not afraid to call people out, even when no one else sees them as a threat. Now, Stokes has a very sharp eye for people who are hiding something, and honestly, the second he lays eyes on Walter White, I feel like he would know that something is off immediately. Walt's polite teacher act might fool most people, but Stokes would sense that something is off. But the problem is, Stokes doesn't really have much patience whatsoever. He's not the kind of investigator who carefully builds a case or plays politics. He charges in, confronts suspects, and tries to intimidate them into slipping up. That kind of approach might work on someone like Jesse Pinkman, but it's exactly the wrong move up against someone like Walter White. Now, Walt is always thinking ahead, and if Stokes started poking around, Walt wouldn't try to fight back directly. He would find a way to remove him from the board entirely. Maybe he frames Stokes for a crime, maybe he manipulates someone else into taking him out, or maybe he cooks up a situation where Stokes just completely disappears. In the end, Stokes wouldn't just lose the case, he'd lose his life. And knowing Walter White, it'd probably be made to look like it was Stokes' own fault. Now, I feel like Stokes would definitely know that something's up with Walter, but in the end, I feel like he would just end up dead like he did with Dexter. And next, we have Patrick Jane. So Patrick Jane from The Mentalist isn't your typical detective. He doesn't rely on forensic evidence or cutting-edge technology. He operates purely on his ability to read people. Jane is a master of psychology, able to pick up on the smallest gestures and words to tell when someone is lying or when someone is hiding something. He doesn't just solve crimes, he plays the people involved like a symphony. He manipulates them into revealing their secrets. Now, Walter White might think he's too careful to ever get caught. He hides his true self behind the image of a mild-mannered family man, but that's exactly what makes Walter so vulnerable to someone like Patrick Jane. Walt's constant need to control the narrative would inevitably be his downfall. Now, Jane doesn't need physical evidence to know something's off. He'd sense Walt's carefully crafted persona and start poking at it. He'd play on Walt's ego, bait him into making a mistake, or use his power over people like Jesse to unravel Walt's entire operation. Instead of a traditional investigation, it would seem more like a psychological performance. Now, Patrick Jane doesn't just catch criminals, he makes them confess without ever needing to raise a finger. He'd slowly manipulate the people around Walter, pushing them toward the truth. Now, Jesse might flip, or one of Walter's partners might crack under the pressure, but in the end, Walter would walk right into Jane's trap without even realizing it, believing he's outsmarted Jane. But Jane, he'd already won the game long before Walt even knew the rules. See, I'm not gonna lie, Patrick Jane is just such an elite level detective that I feel like he would 110% put Walter White behind bars. And next we have Alex Mahon. Alex is one of the sharpest minds when it comes to hunting fugitives. He doesn't just rely on evidence or report, he studies behaviors and routines. Now, Mahon can look at a messy crime scene or a suspect's escape route and instantly start piecing together how their mind works. He gets inside their heads, figures out what makes them tick, and uses that knowledge odds to predict their next move. Now that kind of thinking makes him especially dangerous for someone like Walter White, whose whole life depends on staying 2 steps ahead of everyone around him. But Alex isn't without his flaws. He's emotionally unstable and has a history of drug addiction. Like Walt, he's brilliant, but deep down, he is broken, and he often walks a fine line between doing what's right and what's necessary. Now, if Alex were assigned to track down someone like Walter, it wouldn't just be a manhunt. Now, Walt would likely try to manipulate Mahon, digging into his past and weaknesses, while Mahon would be obsessing over every single detail, slowly pulling the threads that reveals Walt's lies. And in the end, Mahon probably could catch Walter, but it wouldn't be some clean textbook arrest. It would be messy, and Mahon would have to sacrifice a part of his own sanity to win that game. Now, he might end up taking Walter down, but it would feel more like a war than a case. And honestly, depending how far Walt's willing to go, it's not a guarantee Mahon walks away from it alive. But honestly, I feel like Alex wouldn't get enough evidence to put Walter behind bars, but he would find out that he's Heisenberg. Honestly, this could go both ways, but for this video and for my opinion, I feel like he would find out he's Heisenberg, but couldn't really 100% prove it. And next we have Columbo. Now, Columbo doesn't come across as the smartest guy in the room. He always acts like he's confused, asking questions that seem so simple or quote unquote dumb that you swear he's not even paying attention. He's often underestimated, but that's exactly what makes him so dangerous. Behind the seemingly clueless exterior is one of the sharpest minds in detective fiction. Now, Columbo doesn't rush in with bold moves or flashy tactics. He plays the long game, slowly working through every detail of the case, patiently chipping away at the truth with a constant stream of tedious questions. Walter White, being the careful manipulator that he is, would probably dismiss Columbo as just an old, dumb detective. He'd probably think Columbo is too slow or too out of touch and is too easy to outsmart. But as the investigation unfolds, Walt would realize just how wrong he completely is. Now, Columbo doesn't just rush to conclusions, he lets the little things slip through the cracks. Over time, his innocent questions would build into a web of inconsistencies that Walt just cannot escape from. Now, Columbo would maybe charm Skylar or even get closer to the truth by poking holes in Walt's facade. Now, before Walt knows what's happening, Columbo would have everything that he needs, either a confession or a massive mistake that ties him to the crimes. Walt might think he's been in control this whole entire time, but by the time he figures out what's happening, Columbo would already have him cornered, and that's what makes him dangerous. He's never in a rush to solve the case, but when he does, it's always with a smile and just a one more thing that leaves the suspect with nowhere to run. So without a doubt, Columbo honestly is putting Walter White behind bars, and I would even put Columbo over Patrick Jane. He's just that smart. And next we have Detective Loki from Prisoners. Now, Loki is driven by a deep sense of justice, and he gets emotionally locked in when it comes to cases involving innocent people, especially children or families in pain. Now, that emotional drive is one of his greatest strengths, but it can also limit the way he approaches more calculated criminals. Now, Walter White is exactly the kind of opponent who thrives in that cold space. Now, he doesn't always make reckless moves, he hides in plain sight, and he keeps his hands clean as often as possible. Now, Walter has built his empire to look boring from the outside. A car wash owner, a family man, and a cancer patient. Now, there's really nothing for someone like Loki to latch on emotionally to this case. Without a clear victim or an obvious crime scene, Loki might sense something is off, but he definitely struggled to find the smoking gun. Now, Loki would chase the case hard, maybe even suspect Walter eventually, who knows, but Walt's system is built to frustrate detectives exactly like him. I like Loki, I really do, and the movie was top tier amazing. The acting was phenomenal. But let's be real, he'd maybe die in the act of trying to pursue Walter White, because the case he struggled with against in the movie was just his hardest job ever. So against an entire drug lord operation, honestly he's gonna end up dead, and I'll put him behind James Stokes. And next we have L from Death Note. Now, L is one of the most brilliant fictional detectives ever created, in my opinion. He's not the kind of investigator who chases down leads in the streets or kicks down doors. He works entirely behind the scenes, solving major international crimes using pure logic, analysis, and deduction skills. L has this uncanny ability to see patterns where others see noise. He thrives on breaking down complex webs of lies and deception. Walter White, for all his intelligence, relies heavily on keeping up a double life. Now, that exact kind of duality is what L is best at tearing apart. So if L were ever dropped into the Breaking Bad universe with access to DEA case files, phone records, financial data, and surveillance footage, he wouldn't waste any time. He wouldn't need a full confession or physical evidence at first. He'd use logical deduction to eliminate all the possibilities until only one answer made sense. Walter White is Heisenberg. L would quietly build a case, narrow down suspects, and recognize that time, money, and behavior all point to one person, Mr. Walter White. Now, once L's suspicious, it's over. Like, it's GG after that. Like, once L was suspicious about Kira, a person who literally had a supernatural book on his side, he didn't stop until he knew. Like, come on, he's taking down Heisenberg 110%. There's literally no debate in this whatsoever, and I would even put him over Columbo at that too. Yeah, he's that crazy. And next we have Commissioner Gordon from Batman. So Gordon from Batman is the kind of cop who believes in doing things by the book. He spent years working in one of the most corrupt cities in the world, Gotham, and still manages to get results. He doesn't rely on flashy tactics or wild schemes to solve cases. Instead, Gordon's strength lies in his consistency and sharp investigative skills. Now, he's someone you literally want on your side when the odds are up against you. Now, Gordon might be able to lead investigations and manage a team, but without access to insider information or top-notch surveillance resources, it would take him too long to connect all the dots. And in a city like Gotham, where it's layers of corruption and criminal influence, Gordon might struggle to clear the evidence he needs to bring down Walter. Now, if Gordon had access to a team like the Bat Computer or an informant on the inside, he'd maybe stand a better chance. For Jim Gordon, I don't think he would die by Walter White, to be honest, not at all. It's either he would have his suspicions or he'd find out he's Heisenberg. But for this, just because we're not putting Batman into the equation, we'll put him at he'll have their suspicions. And last but not least, we have Rust Cohle. He's not just a cop, he's consumed by an obsessive dedication to the truth. Now, Rust is driven by a philosophy that borders on nihilism, and he sees the world in shades of gray, not black and white. He's not interested in politics or power. His only obsession is solving the case. Now, Walter White is used to manipulating people, like using fear or money, or even his cleverness to keep others in check. For someone like Walt, who has spent years constructing an identity and hiding behind a facade of family and normalcy, Walt's usual methods of misdirection wouldn't work here. Rust wouldn't be distracted by his lies or fooled by his manipulations. Once he locks onto a case, it's only a matter of time before the truth comes out. The longer Walt tries to evade him, the closer Rust gets to exposing literally everything. For Walter, getting away with his crimes would be impossible as long as Rust was on the case. Now, for Rust, honestly, he would put Walter White behind bars. And yeah, this is my list. What do you think? Let me know. W or L?